In 2015, the homeless population in Santa Cruz was at a 10-year low. However, a recent count shows a 14% increase. The number of college-aged homeless has doubled. Even scarier, 68% of those living on the streets used to rent houses in Santa Cruz. Priced out of their homes by the rule of supply and demand, they sleep in cars, tents, and, if they're lucky, on the couches of friends. These are the dire side effects of the Santa Cruz housing shortage, now elevated to a crisis. Tonight, Santa Cruz Mayor Cynthia joins me to talk about solutions for these issues and the action steps the city has in mind. Stay with us. Welcome, Mayor Chase. Thanks for joining us here at CTV tonight.
Thanks for having me.
We're gonna, I want to start with the human face of this first, the homeless. And I know you've been hard at work at the Homeless Coordinating
Committee.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And you have some solutions. But before we get to that, I'd really like you to set the scene for us.
Sure.
We've just had that new report come out. Tell us what the state of homelessness is in Santa Cruz.
Yeah, so the Homelessness Coordinating Committee met and did our research actually before the point in time count that just came out, which is what your data was referring to. And so we were actually going off of our numbers from 2015, which were not good then, and they're no better now. And we sort of suspected that we were going to see an increase in our county, like many counties have seen. And you'd quoted the 14% rise in the county, but there's a 44% increase in the city alone. So it's the impact is real. It's felt throughout our entire region. It's also felt all over the country right now. But in specific, when folks are saying what's going on in the city, they're really feeling the true reality that the increase, it's almost 44%. That's a significant amount of individuals who are suffering within the city limits.
Definitely palpable. You can see.
Yep.
You can see. So before we get to your solutions, I'm interested to know that that's a lot of people in the city that are extra. What is the cost to the city to just maintain the basic?
Yeah, so what's challenging, I mean, there's a lot of things that are challenging around homelessness, and one of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about as part of the committee and as part of my conversations with a lot of people is resources. I mean, everything comes down to resources, really. What was really good, I think, there's a lot of good things that came out of our work on homelessness, but what is clear right now is our community is saying, do something. There was a lot of rhetoric before, a lot of debate about no more services, you're drawing more people here. That right now has really pretty much sort of gone away, where people are saying, look, there's folks who are here, they're clearly in need, they're clearly suffering. City, county, state, federal government, do something. And that's where it gets a little tricky, is the city actually doesn't have a Department of Health and Human Services. We don't get any federal or state pass-throughs that come to us in terms of resources specifically designated for those purposes. So we rely on really partnering with the county, who does get those things, to be responsive to those needs. They serve the entire county, whereas we see a disproportionate impact in the city. So the needs within the city of Santa Cruz are different than the other regions throughout the county, and the impact felt is also different too. So what the city has tried to do, and through the committee's recommendations, for the first time, taken a policy position on what the city thinks we need to do to really address this issue. Many of those things are relatively short-term, they're small in size, they're things that we can put our own resources toward. But in terms of what we have to respond, our only departments that really directly interface with individuals who are homeless are police, which is pretty much enforcement, Parks and Rec, which a lot of times is often enforcement as well, or environmental changes, and Public Works, which again is sort of environmental changes and things like bathroom access and things like that. So those are not, we know, the ways to end homelessness or even really change the course of it. They alleviate some suffering and some challenges, but they're not solving the problem. So that's really where we need to partner with the county and start really lobbying our legislators to say, we can't solve this issue. In fact, we could barely make a dent in it unless you give us the support and resources to do that.
Now, if you had the support and resources,
Right.
what sorts of things would you do?
It's very clear that what people need is a holistic approach. So that includes day services, which is basic hygiene, access to showers, bathrooms, storage. When all of your belongings that you have as a human being are carried with you all the time, and that is literally all you have in the world, it's incredibly important to protect those things. Now, there's places where individuals can't take those items, either for service, they can't bring them into lobbies, say, of a health center because they're too expansive. They need a place to store them where they'll be safe, because a lot of times they're not safe left, in bushes and things like that. They disappear. So those kinds of things are necessary. We also need to, and we are working with our county and other nonprofit partners on coordinated entry. Coordinated entry is a system where you basically find out about people wherever they touch that system and get them into that system so that we can better track them and then meet their specific individualized needs. So setting up ways that we can be those points of contact almost anywhere. So not just at, say, a homeless services center, for instance, or healthcare centers, but other places where people tend to go for services. Like right now, we have homeless veterans services at the Veterans Center. We also have a center, an information center at the library. Places like that where folks are going and could be a point of entry into a system that could actually help get them the resources to meet their needs.
So your idea is those are all portals that lead to one place where their
Exactly.
records are, and
Yes.
they can be helped. Those records could be accessed at different agencies to continue
Right.
their support.
Right, because the issue is that we don't have, that person doesn't stay in one place, they move around. And so we're missing opportunities a lot of times to actually intervene and help get them on a different track. Now, ultimately, what people need is shelter. They need emergency shelter, they need transitional shelter, they need long-term supportive housing, they need all of those things. And there's a movement in the federal government to fund more supportive housing, but not so much emergency and not so much transitional. We know that that is missing the boat because it's not serving all the different needs. Some people need support for a short period of time, and once they're back on their feet, they're not going to return to homelessness again. Some people who are chronic homeless, particularly those who have complex physical needs or behavioral health needs, addiction perhaps, they're going to maybe need that long-term support in order to stay housed and not on the streets. But we need to be able to be responsive, and our system needs to be flexible enough to meet that variety of needs. So we also need a long-term year-round shelter. We have one right now. It is not nearly enough. One of the things that's quite clear in our research is that folks were saying, people come here because there's so many services. When you look at the number of homeless individuals we have who are unsheltered, this is just unsheltered. This is not the folks who are couch surfing or staying with friends. These are folks who are just on the street. It is so widely, vastly disproportionate to the number of services that we have. When you compare us to other communities, it is simply not borne out in the facts that that's what's drawing people here. So what is happening is they're here, and we need to find services for them.
That's what your survey showed. That
Yes.
68% of them were here and have been here for
Yep.
10 years. And so,
Yes.
and then they become homeless.
Yes.
So they're clearly they're our neighbors.
Right. There are neighbors, there are family members, there are friends. Some people are multiple generations who have grown up here. And what we also know that is not just felt by those who are homeless, but those are generally folks who've lived on the fringes of just this side of housed, is many people are not able to stay here anymore. And the disproportionality between the amount that folks are making in terms of income and the rental prices, it's forcing people, it's displacing. It's a displacement issue.
I
really.
read that 45,000 people in our community are overpaying for rent, which would mean that the rent would be more than 30% of their income.
Right.
And that's hard. And then if someone raises the rent,
Someone raises the
Yeah.
rent, or they have an unexpected illness or injury or something that comes up, there's nothing there. There's no safety net.
so let's talk about a couple of the things in your report that were on your short-term list.
Okay.
And one of those was hygiene,
Yes.
bathrooms
Yeah.
and showers. So what is your idea for making that more available and safer for people?
Yeah, so we're looking at two things right now, and we're in the point in our process where we're reaching out to all the stakeholders who are interested in any of those 20 recommendations. Some of them we can do internally, but a lot of them are really about partnerships. So we've got two folks who have come forward and said, we can can really work to support this. So one is expansion of hours and days at the Homeless Services Center, which is already existing infrastructure. It's a location that people know about. So we're thinking if we can expand there, that is one way to increase access. So that's one thing that we're looking at right now. The other one is there is a group of individuals associated with the faith communities who have fundraised on their own and who are looking at having a portable shower facility, which could actually move throughout the region. So that's still getting up and running. We'd love to see more of those happening. We really want to make sure that we're not thinking that this is an isolated issue. We know homelessness is up 14% in the county, so we need to be thinking about how do we serve the full county. And also, by doing that, we're bringing in more resources, because it's not just the city saying we've got this small pool of money and we are committed to addressing this. It's about saying we as a region are going to address this and be able to better serve folks who are there on the streets.
The other thing I thought was really interesting and for it's like big thinking was the device, the mobile device charging stations, which is when not all the homeless people are off the grid.
No.
So they need to stay in contact to get jobs and talk to their families. And tell us a little about how that would work.
That's actually one of the simplest ones. We can probably get that going. We already have a couple charging stations in the Santa Cruz main branch of the library. We're looking at other places that we can add them. They're simple. They're charging stations. They do help homeless individuals especially, but they help anybody who needs to charge a device. But the key point of that is exactly what you said, is people do have devices. That is how they get in touch with services, resources, support. It's how they stay in contact if they have family members or other support systems. And so those are sometimes those critical links that allow people to get back on their feet. So those are simple things that we can do in our already existing infrastructure to just help people get or stay connected.
Now tell me a little about the downtown team.
Yes, Downtown Streets team. So there'll be a ribbon cutting on that soon, and I wish I had the date for you. I think it's in September, but you might have already seen the folks out there. Downtown Streets team exists in other communities, and it's coming here. It's come here. It's already started. They're stationed in the Galleria downtown, and what it is really a group of formerly homeless individuals, recently homeless, some of them still are, who are really supporting each other. And so what they do is they have a team. It's very cohesive. There's a lot of support, but there's just a lot of dignity in it, because you are working together, supporting each other to address issues in the community. Some of it is, cleaning up streets. Some of it is clearing brush. Some of it is, community beautification, basically service to the community. And one of the things that is so clear about homelessness that is rather insidious is it creates an other group, an out group, and it's the us and them. And really, like you said, many people that we're talking about who are homeless in our community are from our community. They are our community members. They are our family members or friends. And so, but they have been relegated to sort of the outside of the rest of the community. So this is a way to bring them back in through dignity, through work, through giving back, and showing individuals who might be thinking about that sort of us and them dichotomy that, wait, this is somebody who's actually doing work that I don't know that I'd want to do, but it's really positive and benefiting the community. They get vouchers, they get connected to resources, and really it's a way to integrate and have mutual beneficial outcomes.
And they get some job experience?
They get job experience, they get references, they get a team of people who are supporting them in job skills. There's productive activity happening during the day, and really just, like I said, that connection that is missing so often.
Yeah, you're back in the flow.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, so these are all good things to do, and they sort of ameliorate the I guess they just make homelessness a little easier and a little safer, but I think everybody would rather have a home.
Indeed.
So, and that comes to, and that's our next subject, is the housing crisis. There's such a shortage of housing here. And I mean, it just seems to be dire. I know you've been on your listening tour about this, and I would love to know what are the nuggets, the real takeaways you've learned from talking to actual people trying to face this issue.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people. Well, I've listened to a lot of people, and I'm listening to a lot more. I'm actually scheduled all the way through, I think, the end of October now, and because of the article in the newspaper recently, I've got more in my inbox who are asking for it, which is great. I mean, there's sort of three things that I'm trying to accomplish with this, along with a whole team of staff from the city who've been fantastic in supporting this. And that is, one, we need to get to a broader spectrum of the community than we typically do in city government. And it's for very practical reasons that most people who are really struggling with housing aren't showing up on the second and fourth Tuesday to tell us about it. And they're not even emailing us necessarily. But we know it is the desperateness in the community around housing is pervasive. And so this is getting at least snapshots of different folks that we wouldn't ordinarily hear from. So that's one thing I'm trying to do. The other one is to have a common language and understanding around what we can do in terms of housing. People have come up with all kinds of really great ideas. And then there's things that are legally not possible, or there's things that are really great ideas if we had a fund source for that. For instance, our redevelopment agencies, which went away several years ago, if we had a replacement fund source for affordable housing, that could go in that list because it's a really great idea. And then there's other things where, you know, we need the land to do it. And in the city of Santa Cruz, we don't have a lot of available land, right, to expand out. We have been talking about expanding up density in certain areas, but beyond that, there's not a lot of options for us to address the supply issue. So I'm sort of talking about all those three things together with people to make sure that we are coming up with solutions that would actually work for this community. And that includes some suggestions like, you know, people talk about, well, Utah solved its homeless issue. And I said, great suggestion. And Utah has funding that we don't have and land forever, right? So those are issues that we couldn't necessarily do here because of those two things. So people are mostly talking about the experience of tenants, because we have over 50% of our city is renters. The rent is extremely high. Part of that is, it's not one thing, I will say that, is that people want to say, oh, it's the university, oh, it's tourism. Those are absolutely factors. They are not the only factors. So Silicon Valley is a factor on that too, where we have very high incomes coming to a beach community. We are an amazing community, and so of course people want to be here. So I caution people not to oversimplify that this is any one cause. People are really, really worried as tenants. Even when they have wonderful landlords, they are scared to complain about a leak or anything like that, because they know the demand is such that what if they get kicked out and then they don't have a place to live.
They really don't have any security.
Yeah. So the thing I would say I'm hearing most is we need to do things to better support tenants.
Yeah.
We need to really address the housing shortage, and there is a wide variety of opinions on that. Some people are saying build only affordable housing. Some people are saying absolutely, we get it, density is the way to go. Some people are saying absolutely not. You know, I'm listening to that full spectrum, and what is clear to me, just like there isn't one cause to this, is there's not one solution.
Well, you mentioned a package of solutions that you thought that you would have to put together to address this. Now, one of the things that I've noticed, one of the things that really stood out for me on the list that came, it is county numbers, but there are a lot of college-age kids without a place to live, and I think that you know, I've read articles where, you know, they're trying to go to school, and what's happening, it seems, is that landlords are evicting their families and dividing up their houses, and to the point where they can fit. One report was 17 kids in a house, and they're making $11,000 a month off of that home. What about rent control? It works in New York City. Could that work here?
Yeah, so rent control has come up, rent stabilization, and so we're certainly talking about it and looking at it. The challenge around rent stabilization is that it doesn't apply to single family homes. So, right, and most people don't know that. And so certainly it's legally, it doesn't apply to single family homes, and it also doesn't apply, and I can't remember the year, to housing built after a certain period of time.
1973.
So yeah, so when you look at the total proportion, which we will have numbers when we come back and do a study session on this, what would the total supply actually that this would affect, we'll have to look and see, is it worth it? Because when you do that to one part of the market, it means that there's going to be reverberating effects for the rest, right? So if you control those apartments, is it going to have an opposite effect or an unintended consequence of affecting the single family homes differently, right? So we have to really look at each and every decision and recommendation that we make on this. Is it shifting something else that's going to have another adverse impact on the community overall? So a lot of people are interested in it. Those who've really looked at it, even and I would say especially tenant advocates, are a little bit wary about pushing hard on that because of how much housing it actually would impact. And they're more interested at this moment anyway on really looking at how do we protect tenants' rights. Just cause eviction has come up quite a bit. And I think that I'll continue to hear about that, because that's really, I feel like, where we could balance things a little bit more so that people aren't so much in fear of losing their home.
I just hear about that all the time. Landlords suddenly figuring, oh, I can raise the rent a lot if I can get this family who's been here for faithfully paying rent for 10 years.
Right.
Yeah, and that just seems very unfair, really
Yes.
unfair. So I gotta ask you this really interesting thing, and I think you've kind of answered it, but I'd like to put more fine point on it, is that there are, according to this report, we would have to build 188 houses a year to get where we need to be in 2023. Yeah. But usually we do about 34. So
those are county numbers, yeah.
Yes, they're county numbers. So what is the reason within the city limits? Is the reason space? There's a need. There must be an interest.
There's no question that there is a need. So there's a couple things. So one of them is that, like I said, there isn't really available land. So we made some commitments years ago, decades ago, to really protect green spaces throughout the city. And those are really considered pretty much sacred land. Those are not getting touched. And so that leaves us with existing places to build, which is either infill, of which we don't have a ton left of that, or to build up in certain areas. And we know that building density in neighborhoods is not actually a good way to respond to the issue. So typically what cities have done is focused on transit corridors where that makes more sense, where you can have smaller units, where people are more creating essentially walkable communities, where you have a grocery store nearby, you have amenities and things like that, health centers, transportation, pedestrian, bike friendly, things like that. And that's typically how cities have been responding to this issue. And that's kind of what we have in front of us right now. And there are folks who say, why are you waiting? Move on this. And then there's folks who are saying, don't do that. You will create change in our community that alters our quality of life. It will bring other problems into our neighborhoods, like parking overflows, and they've pushed back on that pretty considerably. And I haven't heard of another solution yet in all of my listening, that nobody has been able to present another solution. So I'm waiting to hear that. But absent that, that's really what we've got.
Well, the walkable city is real. I love that term, the walkable city, because I like to walk. But the other thing is, a friend of mine, I visited a friend in Washington, D.C. once, and of course it's Washington, D.C., it's a big city, it's not like Santa Cruz. But she said, you walk out, every neighborhood has its own dry cleaner and its own grocery store and its own, you just walk around and you have your neighborhood sandwich shop and it's all right there. So it seems like at one end of downtown, we're sort of doing that. There's a sandwich shop on the corner and above it is apartments, and there are some big empty holes still downtown. Is there any idea of doing more of that at the other end of Pacific Avenue?
So this is the challenge of government. And that is, there's many projects that are approved right now for many of the holes that people see around the city. So it isn't necessarily a matter of getting those things approved, but we're just one piece of that. So then the developer has to get the funding for it. That has nothing to do with the city, right? So we can say, yes, great project, perfect for our community, go for it, and then the money has to line up for them to do that, and so it takes time.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Is the city passively waiting for people to come up with these ideas? Is that kind of your
Or are
role?
we recruiting?
Or are you, pitching this to
Both.
people?
Both. Yeah, so there's both things are happening all the time. There's not actually, we probably know where all the holes are in the city, and there is pretty much proposals for most of those.
Well, that's good news,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah, and folks can go to the city website. In fact, I'd encourage everyone to go to the city website. They just redesigned it. It is very user-friendly. I'm asking everybody to give us feedback on it. But you can actually see there what's in the queue that has been approved for all over the city, all kinds of different things, and you'll see where they are. And so a lot of people are like, why aren't you doing something with this? And I said, well, there's a project approved, but we can't make the lenders lend on it, and some of those things are just out of our hands. It's tricky.
Is there any objection or obstacle that all of the builders or developers have faced that can't be solved by them, that could be solved by the city? Is there resistance to the homeless downtown or things like that?
No, I would say most of them are talking about the lenders being a challenge for them to actually move projects forward, is getting their right alignment. And part of that has to do with some of the things the city requires, like inclusionary housing, creates different funding challenges for some of the developers. One thing I would say is a huge part of this that we haven't talked about is transportation and parking. So developers have a certain percentage of parking that they have to work in there, which means that they have to have a footprint that's large enough to support that. They want to do as many units as possible. We would like them to do more units so that we're providing more housing. But the parking makes that challenging because we don't have lot sizes. Right? Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. It depends on the geography. But one of the things that's happening, in fact, there was another housing event I was at this week, and a woman came from Seattle who used to live here, and she has a really cool job, and I can't remember the title, but basically it's working with neighborhoods around housing projects. And they, in Seattle, have zero parking associated with their new developments. Zero. Now, they can do that because they have a very robust transportation system. We're not there yet. We may never be there because we're not a huge urban, city like that. But I think we can do more than we've been doing. I know that the data is quite clear. Younger people, younger than me, don't want cars. They don't need cars. They walk, they bike. They like that they get to do that. That is a generational shift that folks who often are opposing this can't quite fathom doing themselves, and they don't have to, but other people will.
And they want
so
to.
having openness to the fact that there are many people who we want to be a part of our community, who are willing to and wanting to do that, who want to live here and contribute to our community, we've got to make space for that too.
Well, thank you, Mayor Cynthia Chase. We so appreciate your coming here tonight. We hope you enjoyed your
I had a great
visit.
time.
We hope that you've enjoyed tonight's Selected Spotlight as well. And if there's an official you'd like to see on the show, please email me at becca@communitytv.org. Thank you.